Staff Sergeant Jack Mad Dog Calloway had been cold before. He had been wet, hungry, and miserable before. But this was some next-level government-issued suffering. Alaska. Winter survival training. Who in their right mind thought it was? A great idea to send a bunch of Marines to freeze their asses off in the middle of nowhere with nothing but a knife, a soggy MRE, and a questionable sense of optimism. Oh, right. The United States Marine Corps. Jack crouched in the snow, chewing on what was either frozen beef stew or a very determined rock. He wasn't sure anymore. His breath came out in thick clouds as he eyed the vast, empty white wilderness around him. No signs of life, no backup, no beer. Great, he muttered. This is how I die. Frostbitten and alone, probably mistaken for a very aggressive popsicle. Then the sky exploded, a blinding light swallowed everything. Jack instinctively flung himself backward, barely stopping himself from punching the heavens out of pure marine reflex. The wind howled, the snow swirled, and suddenly he was weightless. He flailed. Nope! Nope! Not today, alien bastards! But gravity had other plans. He was yanked upward in a way that science would probably find questionable. Trees shrank. Beneath him, his stomach dropped. And then, darkness. Jack woke up to the sound of hissing, not the gentle, comforting hiss of a beer can opening. No, this was more like the sound a really pissed-off snake would make right before it lunged at your face. He opened his eyes and found himself staring at three things. Metallic room straight out of every sci-fi movie he'd ever fallen asleep watching. A glowing blue force field holding him in place. A 9-foot-tall reptilian nightmare wearing space armor that screamed, "I take myself way too seriously." Jack groaned. Oh, great. Space dinosaurs. Fantastic. The big lizard puffed up like an angry balloon. I am Supreme Overlord Slagthar the Merciless. Jack blinked. That's a hell of a name, buddy. Did your mom hate you or something? Slagthar's eye twitched. Silence, human. You are now a prisoner of the Korlax Dominion. Your kind is weak, primitive, unworthy of standing before us. Jack stared at him. Uh-huh. Cool. Question. Y'all got Wi-Fi? Also, when's lunch? I skipped breakfast. Slagthar's nostrils flared. He turned to one of his equally large, equally scaly henchmen. How did we capture this creature? The henchman hissed something in a garbled alien language that Jack decided to mentally translate as, Bro, I don't even know. He just showed up. Slagthar turned back to Jack. You should be groveling at my feet. Jack raised an eyebrow. Yeah, see, I don't do groveling. Not really my vibe. Slagthar's tail thumped the floor, clearly trying very hard to remain intimidating. Fine. If you will not kneel, then you will entertain us. You shall fight in the death pit. Jack perked up. Oh, a pit fight? Now we're talking. Just one thing, Slagthar sneered. What? Are you going to beg for mercy? Nah. Jack flexed his hands. Just wondering if I get to keep my pants. You guys got a weird gladiator but make it awkward kind of energy. Slagthar growled. Take him to the pit. The death pit was a massive arena filled with roaring Korlax warriors, most of whom were eagerly placing bets on how fast Jack would die. Jack stood in the center, rolling his shoulders. His opponent slithered out from the shadows, a 10-foot-tall, six-eyed alien monster with enough teeth to qualify as a walking horror story. A booming voice echoed through the stadium. Begin! The monster lunged. Jack did what any respectable Marine would do in this situation. He ducked, sidestepped, and immediately went for the dumbest strategy possible. He threw his boot. It smacked the monster in the face. The crowd gasped. The monster hesitated, clearly confused as to why its opponent had just resorted to throwing footwear. Jack grinned. Oh, you don't like that. Buddy, I haven't even gotten started. The next 10 minutes could only be described as absolute chaos. Jack weaved, dodged, and somehow managed to climb onto the thing's back, where he proceeded to put it in what could generously be called an improvised chokehold, using his bootlaces. The ESOP crowd fell silent. Slagthar's jaw hit the floor. Jack, still perched on top of the unconscious monster, looked up at the stunned aliens. So, do I get a prize or? Silence. Then, one hesitant clap. Then another. Then the entire arena erupted into deafening cheers. Jack dusted off his hands. That's what I thought. Slagthar, red with rage, pointed a clawed finger at him. You will be imprisoned, Jack. Sighed. Yeah. But before you throw me in space jail, quick question. Y'all ever hear of a little thing called military-grade pettiness? Slagthar frowned. What are you? Jack grinned. Time to introduce the Korlax Dominion to some good old-fashioned marine mischief, and maybe, just maybe, burn their empire to the ground while he was at it. Jack Calloway had been in some tight spots before. Bar brawls, bad dates, that one time he accidentally locked himself in a porta-potty during a training exercise, but being thrown into an alien prison cell inside a giant spaceship definitely took the cake. The walls were cold, metallic, and humming with some kind of weird energy. The floor had an ominous green glow to it, which Jack immediately decided he wasn't going to step on just in case it turned him into a radioactive lizard. Across the room, a barred force field kept him from escaping, and beyond that, a pair of Korlax guards stood, holding some kind of fancy space weapons that looked way too over-designed for what was basically the job of watching one stubborn human. Jack rubbed his wrists where they had tried to cuff him. The problem was that the Korlax apparently didn't account for human anatomy. Their cuffs were built for big, beefy three-fingered claws, not five-fingered human hands, which meant that Jack had been able to casually slide them off the second. They left him alone. Now he was sitting in the corner of his cell, legs stretched out, hands behind his head, staring at the ceiling like he was just waiting for his Uber to arrive. So, he finally said, addressing the guards outside. I don't suppose I can get room service. Maybe a beer? Hell, I'd even take some of that weird mystery meat they serve in the mess hall back home. The guards didn't react. Jack sighed. The silent treatment. Classic. Listen, fellas, I get it. You've got a job to do, guarding the scary human and all that. But honestly, I think you guys are taking this whole galactic overlord thing way too seriously. When's the last time you stopped to just chill? Maybe hit up a space bar, grab a drink, complain about work? He nodded toward one of them. You look like you got some real grievances. Let it out, buddy. No response. Jack made a clicking sound with his tongue. Tough crowd. He sat there for a moment longer, drumming his fingers against his leg. He knew he had to get out. The Korlax were idiots, but they were dangerous idiots, and if he stuck around too long, they'd eventually come up with something that might actually work to kill him. Jack wasn't about to wait around for that, so he did what any rational person would do in this situation. He stood up, cracked his neck, and walked straight toward the glowing force field. The guards tensed, gripping their weapons. Jack gave them a lazy grin. Hey, quick question. What happens if I lick this thing? The guards exchanged glances. Jack nodded. Yeah, that's what I thought. Y'all don't actually know, do you? You're just following orders. Stand here, guard the human, don't let him escape. But did anyone actually test this thing on me? Because, and hear me out, what if humans are like totally immune to this stuff? He took a step closer. The guards visibly stiffened. Jack squinted at the force field, pretending to analyze it. You know, this kind of reminds me of an electric fence back on Earth. Now those bad boys, they sting. I know that firsthand. He tapped his chin. Then again, it could be totally harmless. Maybe it's just a fancy light show to scare prisoners. He reached out. The guards immediately shouted something in their guttural language. Jack stopped, hand hovering just inches away from the field. Oh? You don't want me to touch it? But why, I wonder? Is it because it actually works? Or because... You think it works? The guards were looking at each other now, shifting uncomfortably. Jack grinned. Only one way to find out. And then he pretended to touch the field, while simultaneously kicking his boot against the power control panel mounted. To the side, the results were instantaneous. The force field fizzled out. The guards, realizing they had just been had, panicked. Jack wasted no time. Before either of them could react, he lunged forward, grabbed the first guard by the wrist, and yanked, spinning the poor bastard around and using him as a makeshift battering ram to slam into the second one. The second guard went down in a heap of scales and armor, groaning. Jack quickly pried the first guy's weapon out of his claws and examined it. Huh, neat. Looks like a laser gun. Wonder what happens if I push this. A bolt of green energy obliterated the ceiling light above him. Jack blinked. Welp, that's a thing. The remaining conscious guard scrambled backward, reaching for a device on his wrist, probably an alarm. Jack sighed. Nope, none of that. He stomped forward and decked the guard right across the snout. The lizard collapsed. Jack dusted off his hands. That's what you get for underestimating an unarmed Marine. He crouched down, rifled through the unconscious guard's gear, and found what looked like a keycard. Holding it up to the nearest door panel, he swiped it. With a satisfying beep, the door slid open. Jack grinned. Oh, this is gonna be fun. He stepped into the hallway, weapon in hand, and immediately ducked behind a column as two more Korlax patrols walked by. Jack watched them go, then smirked to himself. All right, Calloway. Time to raise some hell. He crept forward, keeping low. He had no idea how big this ship was, but judging by the never-ending corridors and the sheer number of guards, it was massive. His eyes flicked to the control panels mounted along the walls. His Marine instincts kicked in when in doubt.
Press buttons and see what happens. He casually walked over to one of the terminals and started tapping the screen. A series of alien symbols flashed at him. Jack had zero idea what they meant, so he did what any rational man would do. He started
hitting random buttons. Alarms blared. A mechanical voice boomed across the ship in an alien language, followed by the sound of emergency sirens. Jack stepped back. I think I just disabled the security system. A moment later, doors all along the corridor hissed open. Jack blinked. Prisoners. Dozens of them. All kinds of weird alien species. Some with horns, some with tentacles, some just looking vaguely like angry blobs. Jack stared. The prisoners stared back. Jack clapped his hands together. Well, ain't this convenient? One of the prisoners, a massive four-armed brute with glowing eyes, stepped forward. You are not Korlax, Jack smirked. Nope, just an Earth guy here on a very unplanned visit. The brute tilted his head. You freed us? Jack shrugged. Yeah, but mostly by accident. Look, long story short, want to help me steal a spaceship and get the hell out of here? The brute grinned, showing way too many teeth. Yes, Jack pointed at the corridor ahead. Then let's go cause some problems. The entire prison block erupted into chaos as Jack led his newly freed alien friends down the hall, straight toward the ship's armory. The Korlax Dominion had no idea what was coming, and Jack, he was just getting started. The alarms were deafening. The flashing red lights bathed everything in an ominous glow, and Jack Calloway was having way too much fun. He sprinted down the metallic corridors of the Korlax warship, leading a stampede of recently freed prisoners. The ship's halls shook as explosions echoed from somewhere deeper in the vessel, probably another one of his accidental button presses setting off chain reactions. Behind him, the ragtag alien inmates followed, some still blinking in shock at their unexpected freedom, others grinning like maniacs at the opportunity to unleash hell. Jack skidded around a corner and immediately ducked as a barrage of green energy bolts sizzled past his head. A squad of Korlax guards had set up a defensive position at the intersection, their reptilian faces full of panic. They had clearly been expecting mindless, terrified prisoners. What they got instead was a very pissed-off Marine leading an alien riot. Jack grinned. Boys, you're going to wish you stayed in bed today. He swung his stolen energy rifle up, squeezed the trigger, and was immediately blasted off his feet by the gun's recoil. The plasma bolt missed the guards entirely and instead obliterated a chunk of the ceiling. A massive, sparking conduit came crashing down, landing directly on top of the Galactic Squad. Jack sat up from where he'd landed, blinking. That was definitely on purpose. The massive four-armed brute from earlier, who Jack had mentally nicknamed Big Ugly, hauled him to his feet. "Human, do you know how to use that weapon?" the brute asked. Jack dusted himself off. "I mean, mostly. It's like a gun, right? You just point it and—" He spun around, fired again, and accidentally hit an exposed fuel pipe. The hallway exploded. In fire and smoke, Jack winced. "Okay, so maybe I need a little practice." The inmates behind him roared in laughter. Clearly, they had decided that following the crazy Earth guy was more entertaining than staying locked up. Jack pointed toward a nearby blast door. "All right, listen up. That armory should be just through there. We get weapons, then we get off this floating lizard hellhole." Big Ugly squinted at the door. "It is locked." Jack nodded. "Good observation. That's why we knock first." He took a few steps back, then turned to the smallest prisoner in the group, a tiny goblin-like creature with 6 arms and beady black eyes. "Yo, Twitch, think you can crack it?" Twitch, who had apparently been in space jail for stealing an entire moon, cackled. "Give me 30 seconds!" The little thief scurried forward, pulling out what looked like an alien multi-tool from somewhere on his person. Sparks flew as he jammed the device into the control panel. Behind them, the echoes of approaching Korlak's reinforcements grew louder. Jack turned to the rest of the prisoners. "All right, boys, let's play defense. We got company." The Faide. Hallway filled with gunfire as more guards rounded the corner. Jack dove behind cover and started returning fire, this time making a slight effort to actually aim. He managed to take down 2 guards before realizing something important. "This thing is almost out of ammo," he muttered. As if on cue, the rifle let out a pathetic click. Jack sighed. "Well, that's just great." He chucked the gun at the nearest guard's face. The Galactic soldier flinched, giving Jack just enough time to sprint forward, grab the guy by the shoulder, and headbutt him with all the force of a Marine who had spent way too much time in bar fights. The lizard crumpled. Jack turned to the next guard. "You want to do this the easy way, or—" The guard bolted in the opposite direction. Jack smirked. "Smart choice." Behind him, Twitch cackled. "Doors open, boys!" The massive armory door slid open with a hiss, revealing hundreds of alien weapons lining the walls. Jack whistled. "Oh, now we're talking." The prisoners surged forward, grabbing everything they could carry. Jack picked up what looked like a plasma shotgun, tested its weight, then turned back to the others. "All right," he said, loading up on as many grenades as his pockets could hold. "Let's go steal ourselves a spaceship." The hangar was a war zone. Galactic soldiers were scrambling to respond to the riot. Ships were already taking off, trying to escape the chaos. Smoke filled the air as the fires from Jack's earlier tactical sabotage spread. Jack sprinted ahead of the group, dodging laser fire, and skidded to a stop behind a cargo crate. He peered out and spotted exactly what they needed, a sleek, heavily armed warship sitting near the edge of the hangar. Jack turned to Big Ugly. "You know how to fly?" The brute gave him a blank look. "No." Jack nodded. "Good. That makes 2 of us." Twitch, who had somehow ended up perched on Jack's shoulder like a tiny, hyperactive parrot, raised a hand. "I kinda know how to fly," Jack pointed at him. "You're promoted." The group made a break for the warship, ducking and weaving as enemy fire rained down. Jack took the lead, blasting any Galactic stupid enough to get in their way. Just as they reached the boarding ramp, a massive explosion rocked the hangar. Jack turned just in time to see a squad of very pissed-off elite Galactic warriors charging toward them, led by none other than Supreme Overlord Slagthar himself. Slagthar looked absolutely furious. "You!" he bellowed, pointing a clawed finger at Jack. "I should have killed you when I had the chance." Jack grinned, flipping him the middle finger. Yeah, well, hindsight's a bitch, ain't it? Slagthar roared and charged. Jack barely had time to react before the massive lizard warrior lunged at him, swinging a massive energy blade. Jack rolled out of the way just in time to avoid getting bisected. Okay, Jack said, scrambling to his feet. You're, a little faster than you look. Slagthar swung again. Jack ducked, barely avoiding losing his head. Behind him, the other prisoners were boarding the warship. Twitch was already in the cockpit, yelling something about figuring it out as he went. Jack had seconds to act. Then he saw it, a fuel line hanging loose from a nearby ship. Jack grinned. "Hey, Slagthar," he called. "Catch!" He yanked the fuel line, sending a geyser of liquid propellant spraying into the air, directly onto Slagthar. The Overlord snarled in confusion. Jack pulled a grenade from his belt, flipped it in his hand, and chucked it. The explosion was glorious. Slagthar was sent, flying, screaming as flames engulfed him. Jack sprinted up the boarding ramp just as the warship's engines roared to life. He barely made it inside before the ramp sealed shut. "Go, go, go!" he yelled. Twitch slammed a button. The ship lifted off, tilted dangerously, then blasted out of the hangar, weaving through the chaos of the battlefield. Jack collapsed into the co-pilot's seat, breathing hard. He turned to Twitch. "You sure you know how to fly this thing?" Twitch cackled. "Nope," Jack groaned. "Fantastic." Behind them, the entire Korlax fleet was mobilizing. Jack grinned to himself. Time for one last bit of marine mischief. The stolen warship shot through the chaos of the Korlax fleet like a drunk fighter pilot in a meteor shower. Explosions rattled the hull as enemy ships gave chase, firing green energy bolts that zipped past the cockpit's reinforced glass. "Jack." Calloway gritted his teeth, bracing himself against the console. "Twitch, buddy, tell me you've at least played a flight simulator before." Twitch, still wildly pressing buttons at random, cackled. "Oh yeah, once. Crashed it immediately." Jack closed his eyes for a second. "I should have asked for a better pilot." Big Ugly, gripping the back of his seat, rumbled. "We are going to die." Jack exhaled. "Not today, big guy. Not today." The ship shuddered as a direct hit rocked their left thruster. Warning alarms blared in angry alien gibberish, and red lights started flashing across the control panel. The whole ship smelled like burning circuits and bad decisions. Jack turned in his seat. "All right, listen up. We've got a fleet of very pissed-off space lizards on our tail, and they really don't want us leaving alive. So we've got two options. One, we fight our way out and pray this ship doesn't fall apart. Or two, we—" Twitch slapped a big, glowing blue button. The ship suddenly barrel-rolled, barely dodging a direct missile hit, and spiraled into a chaotic loop through the battlefield. Jack was launched sideways, hitting the wall with a grunt. He groaned, pulling himself back into his chair. Or two, we let Twitch make impulsive life decisions. Twitch grinned. That one seemed important. Jack rubbed his face. All right, new plan. We weaponize our stupidity. He scanned the chaos outside the window. They were flying through the middle of a full-blown fleet mobilization. Capital ships were powering up. Smaller fighters were swarming like angry hornets. And in the distance, the largest battleship in the fleet loomed like a floating fortress of doom. Jack's eyes locked onto it. He pointed at the massive ship. You see that? That's Slagthar's flagship. If we're gonna make it out of here, we gotta make sure he doesn't. Big Ugly frowned. How do you plan to fight an entire fleet with one ship? Jack grinned. Oh, we're not fighting. We're gonna crash it. Big Ugly blinked. Explain. Jack spun his chair around and cracked his knuckles. All right, ladies and gentlemen, lizards and tentacle creatures. Today we're pulling off a Florida Man special. Twitch gasped. That sounds amazing. What is it? Jack smirked. It's when you do something so mind-blowingly stupid that it somehow works, Big Ugly grumbled. That does not sound like a plan. It's always the plan. Jack reached for the controls, flipping switches and rerouting power to the engines. We're gonna fly straight at Slagthar's flagship at full speed, cut thrusters at the last second, and eject while this thing rams straight into their command bridge. Twitch's beady eyes widened. We're gonna suicide bomb them? Jack shook his head. No, we jump at the last second. The ship explodes. We survive. Big Ugly crossed his arms. That still sounds like a bad plan. Jack grinned. Bad plans are just good plans with extra steps. Twitch clapped his tiny hands. I love it. Jack grabbed the comms and opened a direct line to the entire fleet. He cleared his throat. Hey, Slagthar, it's me, your favorite abomination. Jack's voice echoed across the comm channels. You may have noticed that your ship is missing. That's because we stole it. And now we're coming for you. The Korlax fleet commander's voice crackled through the speakers, filled with sheer rage. You insolent worm! I will flay you alive! Jack grinned. Uh-huh. Sounds great. One problem, I'm about to crash into your face. Twitch slammed the throttle forward. The ship's engines screamed as they shot toward the massive Korlax flagship at full speed. The enemy fleet immediately panicked. Fighters swarmed to block their path, but Jack, now fully embracing the chaos, grabbed the controls and spun the ship in a violent corkscrew, weaving through their attacks with sheer, reckless insanity. Missiles zipped past them. Energy bolts exploded inches away from the hull. The Korlax couldn't fire directly at them anymore, not without risking hitting their own flagship. Slagthar's massive battleship loomed closer and closer. Jack gritted his teeth. Hold! Big Ugly braced himself. We are going. To die! Jack grinned. Not yet! At the last second, Jack slammed the emergency eject button. The cockpit detached from the main ship, flinging them into open space. The warship, now a 300-ton missile, continued its trajectory. Right into Slagthar's bridge. The impact was catastrophic. The entire front of the flagship erupted in a massive explosion, metal shrapnel flying in all directions. A chain reaction followed. The fires spread to the ship's reactor core, and within seconds, the entire vessel detonated in a brilliant fiery blast that shook the void of space. Jack, still spinning wildly in his escape pod, watched with a satisfied grin. And that's how you deal with a space dictator. Big Ugly, gripping his seat for dear life, growled, How do we land? Jack opened his mouth, then paused. He hadn't exactly thought that far ahead. Then, out of nowhere, a massive shadow loomed over them. Jack turned his head. A sleek, imposing Terran Marine Corps battle cruiser hovered above them. The comm crackled. A deep, gruff voice came through. This is Fleet Admiral Hank Bulldog Thompson. We've been watching your little performance, son. Jack grinned. You like the show? Hell of a show, the Admiral grunted. One man, one freaking Marine, took down an entire goddamn intergalactic empire. Jack leaned back in his seat, arms crossed behind his head. Yeah, well, it was Tuesday. There was a long pause. Then the Admiral chuckled. You want a job? Jack raised an eyebrow. What's the pay? All you can drink. Bar tab on the space station. Jack grinned. You son of a bitch, I'm in. The pod was pulled into the docking bay. As Jack stepped out, breathing in the recycled station air, he was immediately swarmed by reporters, Marines, and aliens alike. Earth's new reputation spread like wildfire. Across the galaxy, alien empires realized one undeniable truth. You don't mess with humans. Jack cracked open a cold beer, leaned back against a Humvee, and smirked at the camera. So, when do I get my Galactic Menace badge?